Welcome back to Biology 1440. This lecture will be about mitosis. This is, let me look, Chapter 9. Chapter 9 of our current textbook. And I bet a lot of you are familiar with mitosis. We're going to talk about it in a little detail here. So here are the stages of mitosis shown in pictorial form. And I wanted to point out that, technically speaking, mitosis is division of the nucleus. Okay, so it's the nucleus where the DNA is dividing. That's what mitosis is, and that's what we're seeing in this picture, just the nucleus. Division of the cell, when a cell splits in half, is actually called cytokinesis, and we'll look at that word later. All right, so mitosis is used for a number of things, and if you've read your book before the lecture, like I suggest you do for all lectures, read the book ahead of time, you'll know what these are. This little girl is growth, and this is a little embryo developing, so growth and development. This individual is healing after surgery. So healing is a type of tissue renewal. And these are yeast cells, like you would bake bread with. And see this one right here has got a little bud coming off the side. Mitosis is used for asexual reproduction. And I want to point out that in plants, your book kind of skips over this. In plants, mitosis makes gametes. Okay? In animals, it does not, but in plants, it does. So by gametes, I mean sperm and egg. Okay? So here are those same ideas shown to you in your textbook. And I want to point out, let me go back to this slide for a minute. I want to point out that there are different kinds of cells in the body. And there are somatic cells. These are like your typical body cells. And then there are your gametes. And those are your sex cells. So a lot of times we focus on animals, of course, in this chapter because we are animals, but I will throw in some plant stuff occasionally. But in humans, somatic cells divide by mitosis, and gametes are produced by meiosis in your typical animal. And so the next lecture that we do, the next day of lecture that we'll do will be on meiosis. Okay, now let's get a little bit of some of the wording down. All of the DNA in a cell, all of the DNA found in a cell, so all the genes in a cell basically are known as the genome. And as you already know, DNA plus the proteins it's associated with make chromosomes, but the chemical, that chemical mix of DNA and proteins is known as chromatin. Chromatin is what makes up chromosomes, okay? So chromosomes are condensed chromatin, meaning chromatin that's wound up really tight. Now in prokaryotes, we have one chromosome that we've talked about before, that nucleoid, that ring of DNA, that single chromosome that we've already discussed. And in eukaryotes, we have many linear chromosomes. They are long rather than circular. So all of this is review for you for the most part. Now, in each of your cells, you have about 2 meters of DNA, and it's broken down into chromosomes. So each one of your typical somatic cells, your body cells, has 46 of these chromosomes. If you were to line them end to end, it would make a 2-meter long length of chromosome, right? Each one of these chromosomes has different DNA on it. Some chromosomes have genes that code for hair color, eye color. Another one might have genes that code for male, female, things like that. So here's a, by the way, here's a bacterial cell with its single ring of DNA. And here's a eukaryotic cell with a whole bunch of linear DNA. This fibrous stuff out here that you're seeing, that pink stuff, that's the cytoskeleton. That helps give the cell shape, and it has a number of other functions. Okay, so I already mentioned this, but here's an official slide for it. Somatic cells are I think of them as body cells, the typical cell that make up make up all of your body. They have 2 sets of chromosomes each. 2 sets. What does that mean? That means you have, I told you there are 46 total chromosomes in those cells, right? Oh, let me go back. There are 46 total in these cells. 23 from your mom. 23 from dad. Now what I mean by that is we number these things, right? There's 46 total, so chromosome 1 through 23, you get one of them from your mom, and you get another chromosome 1 through 23 from your dad, and they make pairs. So here's chromosome number 1, and one of them you got from your mom, one of them you got from your dad. Chromosome number 2, one of them you got from your mom, one of them you got from your dad. All the way down to the sex chromosomes, which they don't have numbered here, but you see chromosome number 20, pair number 22 here. This would be, we could call it pair number 23, and you get one from your mom, one from your dad. In this case, this individual got an X chromosome from their mom and a Y from their dad. So they have XY. So this is a male individual, right? Gametes, on the other hand, only have 1 set of chromosomes. So if you have 2 sets of chromosomes, we often write that as 2N. And this 1 set of chromosomes we just label as N. So 2 times N is 2 sets, right? 1 set is just N. And to put this into words, this condition is known as diploid. 2 sets of chromosomes, di meaning 2, and this is haploid. These are words that we're going to be using a lot. Okay, so if you have both sets of chromosomes, you're haploid. A way to write that numerically, if you have 2 sets, you're diploid. To write that numerically is 2N. So in the case of a human, N is 23, right? So N is 23 in a person. 2N is 46 in a person. So that's how we can write that. I also want to point out that gametes are typically haploid and produced by meiosis, which we'll talk about next time. There are exceptions. Plants make gametes by mitosis, but they're still haploid. And in plants and fungi, spores are made by meiosis, and they are haploid. 1 chromosome each. So gametes and spores are both haploid structures, haploid cells in the different kingdoms. We've already mentioned this already. I just want to point out that DNA is made up of those 4 nucleotides we've talked about in a double helix. It's wrapped around histones, which then wrap around even further. And this is that stuff that we can call chromatin. And it can wrap up even further during certain times in the cell's life cycle and make chromosomes. Okay. So, a typical chromosome is 1 strand of DNA all wrapped up, or slightly unwrapped in chromatin form. But during certain times in a cell's life cycle, that DNA copies itself, we've talked about how DNA copies itself, remember? So when DNA copies itself, this chromosome goes from being one stick, and I want to point out that in reality that stick would be really unwound and you wouldn't really be able to see it under a microscope very well, but we're going to draw it as a stick of DNA to make it clear. That chromosome will copy itself and will look like that, and then it will condense and become visible. And so this is a duplicated chromosome. This is still considered one chromosome because it's connected together, but we have a duplicated chromosome, and they're stuck together at a constricted region right there known as the centromere. Now I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here and pick up next with the next set of slides, and we're going to work our way into the stages of the cell cycle and then eventually the stages of mitosis.